Dobro večer i dobrodošli u Puls Planete, prvi ikada. Ovo je emisija u kojoj ćemo vam donijeti najnovije vijesti svijeta politike, ekonomije, tehnologije društva, pa čak i entertainmenta kada je za to vrijeme. Puls Planete je vaša prilika da doznate šta se zaista događa u svijetu kroz komentare i analize najistaknutijih stručnjaka i lidera mišljenja. Ne propustite najnovije globalne trendove i uvid u ključna pitanja koja oblikuju našu svakodnevnicu. Emisija koja vas povezuje sa svijetom samo na Newsmax Balkans. Ja sam Ikom Ferrer Gotić, a večeras gledajte. Počinjemo politikom. Da li je mir između Ukrajine i Rusije moguć? Ko pregovara u ime Palestinaca u Gazi, te kakav je odnos Muska i Trumpa na koji svijet gleda s rezervom? Politički komentar večeras od profesora strateških komunikacija u Parizu Nidala Šukeira. Januar ove godine je najtopliji januar u historiji mjerenja temperatura, poplave, požari, ko ne poštuje Pariški sporazum. A idemo i u svemir zajedno, istražujemo Mars. Jedini planet u sunčevom sistemu potpuno nastanjen robotima. Ko su ljudi za ovih velikih historijskih priča? Razgovaram s nekadašnjim glavnim naučnikom NASA Džejmsom Grinom. Počinjemo najnovijim vijestima iz svijeta. Izrael je izveo prvi zračni napad na Bejrut od primirja s Hezbolahom u novembru. Meta je bila zgrada u Dejhu, a izraelska vojska upozorila je civila na evakuaciju. Napad je izazvao paniku, mogao bi narušiti krhko primirje. Izrael tvrdi da ga je gađao Hezbolahovo skladište dronova, dok je Liban zatvorio škole na jugu zbog straha od novih napada. Još nije poznato kako će Hezbolah odgovoriti, ali tenzije na granici sa Izraelom i dalje rastu. Ured Ujedinjenih nacija za humanitarnu pomoć optužio je Izrael za bešćutno nepoštivanje ljudskih života u Gazi, upozoravajući da napadi na naseljena područja mogu biti ratni zločini. UN navodi da su zalihe hrane i lijekova pri kraju, dok Izrael od 2. marta blokira humanitarnu pomoć. Svjetska zdravstvena organizacija upozorava na kritičan manjak krvi za ranjene. Od početka sukoba poginulo je preko 50.000 Palestinaca, od čega 18.000 djece.
في طريق بس وين بتودي؟ هاتوا من هنا هاتوا منين عشان التوكل كله شيء على النهر
ايش فيك؟ يلا يا شباب يلا تمام الله يرحمك الله يرحمك يا الله شغلنا وبعدين الله يرحمك
خلاص شايف كيف مخنك ها؟ سكت طلع عندك بتشوفه بعينك بدنا ناخذ الطاوله الكبيره عليه ظهرك يا استاذ
I Ukrajina u fokusu svjetske javnosti. Ruski predsjednik Vladimir Putin predložio je uspostavljanje privremene administracije u Ukrajini pod pokroviteljstvom Ujedinjenih nacija, Sjedinjenih država, Evrope i ruskih saveznika kako bi se omogućili novi izbori i mirovni pregovori. Trump je obećao, odnosno odbacio ovaj prijedlog, rekavši da vlast Ukrajine određuje ukrajinski narod. Putinov prijedlog dolazi dok Sjedinjene države pokušavaju obnoviti pregovore, ali bez konkretnih rezultata. Rusija inzistira na ukidanju sankcija dok Zapad jača vojnu podršku Ukrajini. Putin tvrdi da Rusija drži stratešku inicijativu dok zapadni izvori navode da je primila sjevernokorejske vojnike. Moskva poručuje da nastavlja diplomatske napore, ali odbacuje zapadne sigurnosne prijedloge.
Ми будемо підтримувати будь-які пропозиції, які ведуть до сталого і справедливого миру. Але для цього ми повинні розуміти, про що йдеться, які деталі. І дай Бог, щоб ми знали всі ці деталі, щоб партнери проговорили з нами, тому що в цій війні дві сторони – Росія і Україна. І без України домовлятись, мені здається, безрезультативно.
Первые контакты с новой американской администрацией вселяют определенные надежды. Есть встречный настрой работать на восстановление межгосударственных отношений. Но постепенное решение колоссального объема накопившихся системных стратегических проблем в мировой архитектуре. А именно эти проблемы в свое время спровоцировали и украинские, и другие региональные кризисы.
Politički komentar, kao što smo najavili, večeras nam daje politolog, profesor strateških vladinih komunikacija na Univerzitetu u Parizu, Nidal Šuker, koji mi se javlja iz Pariza. Nidal, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Akka. It's a pleasure being with you.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, Nidal. We have so much to discuss, you and I. First of all, let's talk about Ukraine and the implications of the war in Ukraine, Russia's war in Ukraine. Let's talk about implications, first of all, on European security. And second of all, do you think that there is, anytime soon, some kind of ceasefire possible between the two sides?
Well, Ika, it's a very complicated situation right now in Ukraine because for me, I think the war in Ukraine, it was actually an American-Russian war, and the European, they were forced to enter to it. But the situation right now with the Trump administration, it's a bit different. So there is a lot of security issues. And this war has reshaped all of Europe. But I think we are very near for a ceasefire, within the mediation or whatever we can call that is doing the Trump administration. But is it what we really need, just a ceasefire? No, I think we need a lasting peace. And to have a lasting peace, it's very difficult today with the conditions that we have. That's why the situation is really complicated. We can say that, yes, we are going for a ceasefire, but for a peace, a lasting peace, which really will make the security in Europe, I don't think so.
All right, let's talk about the lasting peace that we need to get on the table. So what role, first of all, does NATO response to Ukraine crisis play in shaping this future of the alliance?
Well, if you want, NATO has a very important role, but NATO as well is related to USA. So I think we have a lot of challenges here in Europe right now and NATO as well. I think all the eyes is going towards the USA position, because I think it's the major position in how things will go on. And it seems with Trump administration, we are going in one way, and this is really very bad. And that's why we've seen a few days ago in Paris, a big conference with the NATO participation as well, to have a third force. And I think it's very important. And right now we've seen that Britain and France, they are ready to enter even into Ukraine. So I think NATO right now doesn't have really a major role because of the USA position right now. That's why we are seeing a third force that President Macron and the Prime Minister Starmer are working on. So
Yes,
I think
but don't you
it
think
will be a balancing.
Don't you think that this is the first time in 3 years' war that two sides have sat at the same table, for example, in Saudi Arabia, or having to get the chance to negotiate lasting peace or even ceasefire, even if it's not lasting peace. But we're seeing them sitting at the same table for the first time in 3 years. Now, that is something that Biden administration has not gained, has not managed to get to. We do see European Union going into Ukraine and giving, of course, all the financial aid that is necessary for Ukraine to defend itself. But how can we assess the international sanctions against Russia that impacted the global economy, impacted the global peace, and what might be their long-term effectiveness eventually if it comes to, Trump's administration?
I think Europe is paying. Europe paid a lot with Biden administration because it was, as I said, forced to enter to this war. As you remember, President Macron.
But when you say forced, what do you mean by that?
I mean that France, Germany, they were working till the last minute to have guarantees for Russia, because Russia was asking for guarantees, okay, from NATO and from USA, and Biden administration didn't give these guarantees, and they pushed Ukraine and they pushed for the war. So that's why European, they were forced to enter to this war, which is in the European land. So they are in the war. And right now, they are paying again because you have Trump administration. He doesn't want anymore the war. And right now, the Europeans, they are looking for guarantees. Right now, the problem in Ukraine is not only Ukrainian, because as you can see that right now there is all of Europe, they are asking guarantees from
but I want to ask you this,
Trump
Nidal.
administration.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. Of course, there should be security guarantees to every country, and every country should be able to determine their own security policies internally. That is, of course, one of the arguments that is on the table with Ukraine, which Europe, of course, sides with and agrees with. Now, how does the involvement of foreign nations in providing military aid, economic support, money to Ukraine now influence the global power dynamics, which is now the US as well? We're seeing Trump trying to pull out of the deal and have two sides have the war be done already. How do we assess that on the implications on a global level?
I think it will help that the problem will be lasting more, that the Ukrainian people will not lose more. But we are facing in Ukraine a big dilemma. I think from my own opinion, Russia can't lose the war. Theoretically, a nuclear power should not lose the war, because it will change a lot of things. You understand me? So it's really a big problem, because the solution is very complicated. It's very complicated for sure. What is trying European right now, as I've said, like France, Great Britain, Germany, a lot of countries helping Ukraine. It's very important to have a good position in the negotiations, okay?
Yes.
But I don't think that it will help Ukrainian people to win this war.
Yes, and Ukrainian people and Russian people are very tired. There are losses on both sides, and Ukraine has been going through this for 3 years now. I want to take you to another conflict zone as well, Nidal, right now, and that is Gaza. One of the burning questions is, will this ever stop?
Should be. No war lasts forever. Huh? It should be, but
It's lasting for 75 years.
Yes, I think it's the time to end it up. Okay, but do we really? We are working on that. I think we have a lot of extremists, and that's why they don't want peace, huh? From Palestinian side and from Israeli side. There is both sides. They really.
Who do you think?
Who do
you think is driving this conflict into further black hole? Who do you think is the main driver of this conflict?
You know, it's a historical problem. You know, it's not a problem from
yes,
today.
But seeing it from this perspective today, with the international community, of course, with the humanitarian crisis, who is driving this to the further war?
I think today we need peace. We need a lasting peace. We need a real
Can you answer my question, Nidal, please? Who is the driving force of the humanitarian catastrophe that we are seeing? Who is the driving force of this war that is never ending and that is now over a year and a half ongoing, even unilaterally ceasefire stopped by Israel? Who is driving this? Now, it's a very simple question, and I'm just trying to get an answer from you so we can continue this conversation in an analysis that is important to have in the conversation that is important to have today.
I think the main actor playing in Gaza today is as well same as in Ukraine. It's USA. USA has a vital role in Gaza because they have a direct implication with the Israeli government. So they control a lot of things. This is from one side. Other side, you have a lot of extremists in Gaza. They don't want to stop this war. So I think the war is, in between these two parties.
All right. No, okay, thank you for that. I want to talk about the lasting and prolonging humanitarian crisis that is we have to talk about when it comes to Gaza. We have to be really honest and open about what is going on. What we see on the ground is children being slaughtered day in, day out. 7th of October was a terror attack that was led by Hamas on the Israeli civilians. 1,200 Israeli civilians have been killed by Hamas on 7th of October 2023. The whole world has condemned it. Do you think that the response of Israel attacking Gaza and the West Bank as well was proportional to October 7th? Now, what we know today is 50,000 civilians have been killed by Israel in a year and a half, from which 18,000 children, and 99 or 100% of the citizens of Gaza, Palestinians, are being drawn to complete instability, food insecurity, a humanitarian crisis. Now, what I'm trying to do here is open a conversation. How do we stop this? Who needs to sit at the table, just like we talked about Ukraine and Russia? Who needs to sit at the table to stop the suffering of the civilians. Now I'm talking about the civilians and humanitarian crisis. Now this is the question. Let's try to get to the answer of that.
I totally agree with you. I think the civilians from both sides are, the main victims of this conflicts. It's really very hard because you are talking about a country and you are talking about a group. It's not a government. Hamas is not. It's not a government. So right now the negotiation is with the third parties, and as I told you, it's really the main idea here, just to protect civilians, because we should protect civilians. Gaza is suffering. Gaza is really suffering. There is no more Gaza. Gaza has been devastated by the Israeli. So I think we need peace, and Hamas is the main obstacle from the Palestinian side for peace. I think the best way to to have a lasting peace and to stop extremists from both sides is peace. Because peace, if there is peace, you will have no extremists on both sides. But the war will continue because there is extremists. You understand me?
No,
So
I do completely understand you, but of course, in spirit of fair reporting and balanced reporting, we need to understand the implications of the attacks of Israeli government on the civilians in Gaza, and we need to understand the implications of terrorist organizations such as Hamas on the civilians in Israel as well. Yes, everyone needs peace, but again, my question is, who needs to sit at the table? Who is negotiating for the Palestinians if they don't have their own government? Now, that is probably something that we will have to reopen again and try to get the answer to get to the bottom to as well, Nidal. But for now, I would like to thank you for being on my show tonight. Let's sit together again and let's try to find some more answers together. Yeah?
Thank you, Ika.
Thank you. Thank you, Nidal. Elon Musk i Donald Trump imaju složen, komplikovan odnos koji se kreće između saradnje, podrške, ali i neslaganja. Elon Musk, izvršni direktor Tesle, donirao je $288 miliona predsjedničkoj kampanji Donalda Trumpa. Predsjednik Trump je uveo carine od 25% na uvoz automobila koji nisu proizvedeni u Sjedinjenim Državama, tvrdeći da bi to moglo biti neto neutralno ili čak korisno pak za Elona Muska i Teslu s obzirom na njene proizvodne pogone u Teksasu i Kaliforniji, a ne preza i da promoviše Muskova električna vozila.
Hello, President Trump. Are you looking to buy or lease today?
Well, I'm going to buy, and I'm going to buy because, number one, it's a great product, as good as it gets. And number two, because this man has devoted his energy and his life to doing this. And I think he's been treated very unfairly by a very small group of people. And I just want people to know that you can't be penalized for being a patriot. And he's a great patriot. And he's also done an incredible job with Tesla. And I mean, nobody else has a car company started up in the last 30 years that's been successful. I don't think so. And not only successful, but super successful. And because he's able to find billions and billions and billions of dollars of fraud and waste and all of the things, I mean, our country is going to be very strong very soon because of a lot of the things that he's done and a lot of the things that I'm doing. And there's no better team, but there's no better for what we're doing. There's nobody like this, and he shouldn't be penalized. Good. Pick number 2. That's beautiful.
A sada se odmičemo od politike, idemo u istraživanje svemira, možda subjektivno meni ipak draga tema, ali s vama bih da podijelim priče, razgovore s ljudima koji stoje iza najvećih dostignuća čovječanstva. Da li ste znali da je Mars jedini planet u sunčevom sistemu koji je u potpunosti naseljen robotima sa Zemlje? Posljednji NASIN rover Perseverance letio je u krater jezera 18. februara 2021. godine u područje drevne delte gdje istražuje tragove drevnog života i prikuplja uzorke stijena i regolita za mogući povratak na zemlju. Ovaj krater je dobio po malom selu u Bosni i Hercegovini, a ime jezero je NASA odlučila iskoristiti zbog sličnog oblika i mineralne kompozicije kao i ovdje na zemlji. Slijetanje je bio historijski moment za svijet, a posebno za ljude koji su sjedili u kontrolnoj sobi NASA JPL.
In preparation for parachute deploy. The navigation has confirmed that the parachute has deployed and we are seeing significant deceleration. SkyCam maneuver has started. About 20 meters off the surface.
We're getting signals from MRO.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the sands of past life.
Looks like we're getting the first image.
This is the most amazing thing. This is what NASA does. This is what we can do as a country.
Jim Green has contributed significantly to planetary science, authoring over 125 science papers on Earth and Jupiter's magnetospheres, and over 100 technical reports and articles in a variety of magazines. As NASA's Planetary Science Division Director, he led major missions, including New Horizons, Juno, and of course, Curiosity. He became NASA's chief scientist in 2018 and retired in 2022 after 42 years of service. And I'm being joined by James Green from Washington, D.C. in these moments. Jim, welcome to Newsmax Balkans. Thank you for joining me on this platform as well.
Thank you so much for the invite. I'm delighted to talk to you again and love talking about space.
I love talking about space and so much. I've missed talking to you. I have to say it's such an honor to have you here as well.
Thank you.
And we have so much to discuss. Two main topics, Jim. We are going to discuss climate change here on Earth. And of course, we are going to discuss and understand better where we stand and what we are doing and where we're going. And of course, we are going to discuss Mars and space exploration. I love your t-shirt. I'm going to say that first of all. So let's start with climate change first. First things first.
Sure.
Okay, so are we in trouble? What is going on? Should we be really worried after everything that we are seeing happening in the world at this moment?
Well, assuming you wanted to talk about climate change, because there's other things going on in the world, but indeed, this is a very important time for us to continue our exploration of the Earth from space, because it's from space that we can really monitor what's going on in our climate, land resources, where there are certain emissions going on, wildfires, things that contribute to our atmosphere and contribute to our greenhouse gases that allow unnatural heating to go on. So we have to keep that going. Fortunately, there are some new things happening in that area, and we're monitoring it every day.
What role do rising global temperatures play, Jim, in the unpredictability, severity of floods around the world? How does climate change directly contribute to increasing frequency and intensity of wildfires that we see across the world, especially now in California that we've seen just a month ago?
Well, there's a couple things going on. When we did the climate modeling simulations several decades ago, which really alerted the world, and this is coming from NASA, that increased CO2s in our atmosphere will will move us more like Venus. And we found out how the climate changes by looking at planets like Venus and Mars. It was just a wonderful opportunity to do comparative planetology. And it tells us that greenhouse gases heat up the world as sunlight comes in, heats our land, but that heat is not let out because of our greenhouse gases. So we've been monitoring it now for several decades. The modeling tells us that climate change starts when weather patterns shift. Now that means areas that are dry get more rain, areas that have a lot of rain become more dry. Well, as climate patterns shift and areas, in terms of forest areas, which used to get rain to support, of course, the floral and fauna and the trees, now become more drought-like, then that's very susceptible to wildfires.
And Jim, of course, humans, especially humans, have a lot of responsibility to what is going on right now in the world. But of course, we cannot deny the fact that eventually the world will end in somewhat 4 or 5 billion years when our sun expands enough to engulf us completely. But right now, in this moment, humans do have responsibility and should take some accountability for the situation that we are in, for the climate change that we are in. How much of that accountability should we really take? What do humans really do that has caused us live in this climate, this global warming, this climate change that is affecting the oceans, the life on Earth, life in the sea, and the flora and fauna?
Well, indeed, the climate, you're now talking to a planetary scientist who looks over billions of years, so it's easy for me to say that the climate changes all the time. The key is that we understand now what the baseline change is, and anything that goes above or below that baseline, we want to look for culprits in that. Now that indeed could be volcanoes or many different natural phenomena that create changes in our climate on a more rapid basis. But the changes overall have been slow. This allows humans to evolve, and I mean slow over thousands of years. But what we're seeing now is temperature changes for which they don't match the baseline. They are going up. And that's got to be due to the environment around the world today, where we're dumping more CO2 into the atmosphere. Now, it's important to point out that that CO2 is what's called a greenhouse gas. It's the most responsible for the huge temperature heat at Venus. However, it's not the top greenhouse gas. Water vapor is. And of course, we're not going to get rid of the water. The second one is methane, but methane doesn't last very long. And so consequently, the real problem is a little CO2 in our atmosphere that continues to grow, causes additional heating. Therefore, the sea rises because it's hotter, and we get more water vapor, and therefore we get a multiplier effect by having more heat dumped into the atmosphere that doesn't dissipate. So NASA's been monitoring the world and over many decades, as I mentioned, and we work with several other government agencies, and we determine each year what the average temperature of the Earth is and compare it to last year's. Now, this is really important because we can only do this from space.
That is exactly my next question, Jim. Imagine having these conditions on Mars. We'll talk about Mars in just a second, but imagine having the greenhouse gases on Mars that would terraform the entire planet for us to be able to live there. We'll talk about it in just a second, of course, but having this here on Earth, it's a completely different story. It's a completely different, and this is exactly my next question, just what you're mentioning. What efforts is NASA making to collaborate with other organizations and agencies to mitigate the effects of climate change, such as carbon capture technologies or disaster response?
Well, NASA has been doing a variety of carbon capture technologies since the early part of the space program. You have to realize that humans in space create that CO2 by breathing. And what happens, of course, is it's a confined environment. So if you don't take out the CO2, they'd be dead in a few days. So the pioneering of these efforts now are going into industry, and many companies are actually developing systems that are carbon capture and taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and then sequestering it somehow. But what's really critical to know is this is only one part of many different things that need to be done to be able to overall lower our CO2 input into the atmosphere. Indeed, many nations got together in 2015 at the Paris Accords, made decisions that said they would keep their CO2 emissions under a certain amount. And what's happened when the review came in 2020, 5 years later, that all these countries had extreme difficulty in doing it, and that's because it's hard. It's hard to do. Many things are happening. We're making rapid progress in many different areas, but we still have a ways to go. We're probably a couple decades away from really getting it under control and getting a handle on it. And so in the meantime, we're going to have to learn to live in a hotter world.
Wow. Especially, that is especially hard to accept for someone who doesn't like summers. I have to tell you that. There is, when you say we will have to learn to live in a hotter world, but there are certain solutions that we can take, it somewhat calms people down, that scientists just like you are optimistic. That is important. All right, Jim, I want to go to our favorite topic ever, and that is Mars and space exploration. I want to mention that you have written the book Mars on Mars, and you were played as a character in the movie The Martian. So your role in NASA is incredibly significant, and everything that you have done in the agency. And not just for the agency, for space exploration, for the world, for us to understand better where we live, and like I said, where we're going. It's such an honor to have you on the show. And let's talk about Mars now.
Right.
What are the
Let's talk about Mars.
Let's talk about Mars, our favorite topic. So Perseverance rover has landed on Mars in Jezero crater. Jezero, that is named by a little Bosnian village. Such an honor to have that somewhere on a different planet. So what are the key scientific goals of this mission, of the Perseverance mission, the exploration of Jezero crater? What do we know about this? Why was this location chosen specifically?
This is an absolutely spectacular place. So imagine going back in time like 4.2 billion years, which is like 300 million years after all the major planets were put together. And Mars was a blue planet, just like the Earth was. It was cooling off. There was a lot of water. There were greenhouse gases keeping it warm and making that water a liquid ocean. And all of a sudden, on the ancient shoreline of Mars, a huge impactor came in, probably from the asteroid belt, slammed into Mars and created this enormous crater. This crater is a couple hundred meters in depth and very large on that ancient shoreline. And this is exactly at a place where a river was pouring into the ancient ocean. Now that river ends up pouring into the crater. And so over time, this river for tens of millions, maybe even a couple 100 million years, dumping water into this crater, filling it up. What happens next is that as the water from the river hits the crater, which is now still water as it fills up, it drops whatever sediment it has that it's carrying from way upstream, hundreds of kilometers upstream. Now, this sediment then builds up a delta. And that delta is huge. Today, that ancient delta, because there's no more water in the crater and there's no more river running, the thickness of that delta is about 70 meters. And so this delta then has been built up over time. It's the perfect time capsule to really look at what was happening on Mars by taking a stratigraphy, taking rock samples, and then we want to bring those back and put them in our laboratory to really study what's happening during that wonderful era where Mars was a blue planet. What happens next is the crater fills up and blows open the top of the crater that's facing the ocean and starts flooding that material back into the ocean of ancient Mars. So it's a spectacular time to be wandering around Mars, seeing what's happening.
Spectacular time to be alive. Seeing the images and the footage from the rover itself in real time is something that we can say definitely great time to be alive, Jim. One important question everyone's asking about, and this is what rover is also looking for. Is there life? Has there ever been life on Mars? What specific signs of ancient life is Perseverance looking for, and how will these findings shape future Mars missions, but also some of the moons of Saturn, of course. But first of all, have we found anything so far?
Well, we're waiting for the rocks to be actually completely captured in our capsules, all 43 samples, so that we then can go and get them. In fact, NASA's currently planning a mission called Sample Return to bring that rock record back to Earth. What the rock record is going to tell us is not only what happened to Mars during a time period that it went through rapid climate change, because it was a blue planet, now it's a very arid planet, desert-like, and of course, life may have existed there and built up in the delta. What we see is we want to bring those samples back and take a detailed look. Now, an example of past life here on Earth that is also in our rock record is that we have more than 5,700 minerals that we've identified. Now, mineral is a rock that has certain atoms in its lattice, and it's a solid object. And what happens is some of these minerals are made from dead life. This occurred in our planet over pretty much the same time of the rock record that we're getting from Mars. And so out of the 5,700 minerals here on Earth, 349 or so of them were made with dead life. So the key in bringing these samples back is not only look at over time, because they're a time capsule, just like a rock record is here on Earth, of ocean, land, and atmosphere interactions that build up the rock over time. But it could tell us with certain mineralogy that there was life on the red planet early on.
How exciting is that? How exciting is that?
Pretty exciting.
That's
yeah.
Very exciting. Now, the question is, how do we bring the samples back to Earth? I know there's a mission being prepared for us to catch the samples somewhere around in the orbit of Mars and bring them back to Earth. How are we doing with that? How are we doing on that?
Well, what we're doing is studying alternatives. The mission to bring the rocks back was originally conceived about 10 years ago when I was head of planetary by myself and Doug McQuistion, along with our European partners at the European Space Agency. And so that's an old idea. We thought this was the best way to do it. It turns out we have new assets and new capabilities that we didn't have back then. We knew they were being developed, but we didn't know they'd be available. And so that these new concepts are being tried out. And if that works, it should overall lower the cost in getting the samples and bringing them back. That's always what NASA's interested in doing. And then allows us to get them. Now, of course, when they return to Earth, they'll come in a capsule. That capsule will be dropped off in our atmosphere. It'll land in the Utah desert. And then we take the samples immediately to a BSL level 4. So this is biosafety level 4 facility. BSL 4 facilities have anthrax and some, manage some really tough stuff. And so we want to be able to take these samples and quarantine them and then do an initial look at them to make sure that there's no pathogens on these samples that would be tough on our own life here on Earth. And that's part of our commitment to do planetary protection, and that includes protecting life here on Earth. And once we approve that these are available, we'll start sending them out and having scientists all over the world examining these, looking for remnants of ancient life.
Imagine the data that we are going to collect having these samples back, something that we have been waiting for decades, definitely, and especially for years since Perseverance has touched it down on Mars. So we know two things so far. We know that we can hear, we know what the sound is like on Mars, and we know that we can fly. Every Ingenuity test has been successful, and it has flown even longer and further than we could have ever imagined. How did we do that,
Right.
and what does that really tell us?
Well, Ingenuity is what we'd call a technology demonstration capability. It was originally proposed by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, just our top engineers in the world in planetary science are there. And we went ahead and said, okay, let's keep trying to build something like that. And they demonstrated they could fly it in a vacuum chamber that had the pressure of and composition of the Martian atmosphere. Now, this was really exciting for the simple reason we can do an analog of that. We can go in our atmosphere higher up at a level where the temperature and pressure is the same as that on Mars. And that height is 120,000 feet. It's above the ozone. I mean, I have never seen a helicopter fly that high or anywhere near that high, and yet that's what we're doing on Mars. And so, indeed, they got it working. We landed it with Perseverance. We thought if this does 5 flights, we'll call it a success. And it did about 77 flights before it had a wing that got damaged in one of the landings, and now it's sitting on the surface as a weather station.
Amazing. I do have one more question, Jim, and that is, of course, your book you author now. Why Mars? And what are we going to read in this book that a planetary scientist, physicist has written?
Well, this is a fabulous book. It took several years to get it together, and it's a Taschen book. Taschen is, of course, known for some spectacular art. It's really art and photography and lives of artists, beautiful paintings, beautiful libraries, beautiful museums. I mean, they pick some top topics. And of course, Mars has some beautiful areas. So it really is, the book is called Mars, Photographs from the NASA Archive. And indeed, as we pored over what was coming in from our past orbiters, and of course, all our rovers, we selected some pretty spectacular images, many of which have never been seen by the public. And then, of course, we want to write about what we're finding, what we're doing. And it makes just a wonderful book. It actually has 3 languages in the book. So I wrote a chapter on looking for life on Mars. And so it has that chapter is in English, French, and German. What's really neat about it is if you look at each of the chapters, the figures are new in each chapter, even though, I'll talk about this or that and point to a figure. There's so many like areas on Mars that we could change up the figures. And so you may not be able to read one or another of the languages, but the images are still spectacular throughout the book. And there's several wonderful authors that have helped us.
Amazing. If nothing, we can look at the beautiful images. I will read it though.
Indeed.
I will read it though. You know that I will.
Okay. Okay.
And I'll give you feedback
Good.
on that. Jim, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us about climate change and, of course, our favorite topic, Mars and space exploration. We will be seeing each other more, I suspect. Looking forward to that. Thank you.
Yep. Let me know what you'd like to talk about next.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Toliko u prvoj emisiji Puls Planete. Ove i ostale informacije i razgovore koje ste propustili potražite na našem sajtu newsmaxbalkans.com kao i na našim društvenim mrežama. Do naredne sedmice, laku noć.